Good evening, and welcome to this episode of PMC Studio Workshop, an interview for the PMC Studio and educating those that want to come in and learn how to produce television. I'm Nate Eldridge, and I'll be your host for this evening. Each episode is an interview with someone doing interesting things in and around the greater Portland community, while people who want to learn how to use our studio and its equipment get experience on these cameras and in the control room directing. Today, we're interviewing Ann Smith, a former English teacher and treasurer for Project Bazia, a support program for immigrating Africans to stay in touch with their cultural roots and academically develop themselves. How are you today, Ann?
I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. So we were talking earlier, and it came up that life is comprised of a number of different decisions. And the decisions that we make are the ones that end up leading us down a certain road.
This is true.
So with that in mind, tell me a little bit about where you originally grew up.
It would be, I'd have to give you a long list of
That's fine.
Where I grew up. My family moved every 18 months when I was growing up, and that started from the time I was born until I was in my sophomore year of high school. In fact, I honestly cannot recall some of the places we lived. A lot of people that I've mentioned this to have said, oh, was your dad in the military or something? No, my dad was, I guess the best word, he's gone now, so I don't think he'd be offended. He was a real narcissist. Mm-hmm. He had grown up as the star child of his family. He was a doctor. He was very handsome. And he kind of expected everybody to do whatever he said, because that's how it worked in his family. And when we located someplace and he started trying to expand his medical career, like whether it was private practice or working for an insurance company, he did a lot of different things with his degree. VA hospitals, he was all over the place. If everybody didn't start bowing down to him, he would come home and my mother would say, oh no, I know that look. She'd say, I'm sorry I unpacked so much. And sure enough, within 6 months, we'd have relocated. Now, this was in the 50s and 60s. I mean, I was born in 1944, but I don't remember the early stages. But I do remember the 50s and the 60s. And the moves weren't far geographically. I mean, like we'd move from one place in Rhode Island, which is a very small state, to another place in Rhode Island. But at the ages that we did this, I wasn't about to go someplace and visit any old contacts. I never formed any strong attachments to anybody outside my family, because why bother? You know, and was also difficult because my social skills were pretty weak.
You didn't have any training or experience in that, and you were moving constantly.
Well, what's kind of funny is I have realized not too long ago that the gentleman that I work with on Project Bazia, besides members, blood relatives, he is the person I have known longest in my whole life.
Wow.
And I have known him for 17 years. Wow. And I think how odd that is, because, I mean, I didn't meet him until I was quite older. None of my marriages lasted very long, because I'd get to a certain point in a relationship and there'd be a problem, and I wouldn't know what to do.
Right.
Wouldn't have a clue. I didn't know whether, I'd just say, oh, the heck with this, goodbye.
Pack your bags and move on.
Pack your bags and move on, or they would say the same thing to me, and it would end. I didn't know how to continue a friendship or a relationship beyond a certain point, and that's the point at which it becomes meaningful.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier in our conversation that there was a transformative moment at 12.
Yes, and I think that is, quite frankly, I think that event in my life saved me from becoming as hesitant to become involved with the world as the rest of my family is. I guess it's the politest way of saying it. I have two siblings, all of whom, the other two, they have this very strange way of becoming involved with other people, I think. Whereas I'm adventurous and look for opportunities to get to know people much more than they do. Now, when I was 12, however, my mother was contacted one day by an aunt of hers, a very sophisticated New York lady, who was, shall we say, she was pursuing the attentions of her boss. And her boss had planned, he was a geologist, and he had planned a semi-business trip to Europe, and he had a daughter by a previous relationship, and he was going to take his daughter. So they had to buy 4 berths on the Ile-de-France. That's how they were going to go over there. And they had an empty bed. And my aunt said, "Gee, Jack," she said to her boss, "isn't it going to kind of be awkward sometimes to leave your daughter alone in a stateroom or a hotel or wherever she'll be?" Because, I mean, she was going after him in a big way. And he said, "Yeah, you're right. She should have someone to interact with." And she said, "Well, I have a niece." And there it was. I went to Europe for 6 weeks when I was 12, without my family, with an aunt whom I didn't know very well. In fact, there were some problems that I would have told her about, and I'm not going to go into them now. They were kind of sordid. But no, I mean, there was a lot about the trip that was eye-opening for me at age 12.
I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, by the time the trip was over, I had a strong feeling I understood why my aunt had wanted to go on this trip.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to hear the irony of this. Irony of this, though.
Please.
When we got back, I told my mother some of the things that were going on. My mother was angry. She didn't think it was right to expose her innocent daughter to this kind of behavior, and she wrote to her aunt. Her aunt wrote back and said that I was a pain in the butt and that I was lying about all these things. However, 2 weeks went by, and my mother got another letter in which my aunt apologized because the man she was pursuing had impregnated another woman before we left on the trip. And now he was marrying her. I mean, talk about something like a bad B movie,
I know,
right?
you can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. In fact, as an adult, I've become someone who loves to write books. But sometimes I look at my plots and I say, God, nobody's ever going to believe this. But it's the kind of thing that happened when I was a kid. So anyway, so that was a transformative moment for me, to be away from my family for 6 weeks with people who were not hovering over me the way family does.
Yeah.
And I think it was good.
Yeah, sounds it.
I think it was good.
So do you think the spark for being an educator was ignited during that trip?
No. I think the spark to being an educator was much earlier in my life than that, because when you move and you're the new kid on the block, it's very hard to find out right away who you can be friends with. In fact, you may not be able to make friends with the children your own age. So I always made friends with younger children, especially after one incident in one place we lived. 5 girls beat me up because I said something, and it was tactless and stupid, but they were all friends. They'd known each other since they were in diapers. And who was this big mouth who came into the neighborhood and was always talking? I did talk a lot. And so after that, when we moved to a new place, I made a point of getting to know the younger children because they usually didn't try to beat me up. And that was what I would do to sort of attract them, is I would be like a teacher to them.
So you would hold school?
I would hold school. I did this also with my cousins on holidays, and we were all stuck, and I was stuck with 5 younger kids that I had to sort of supervise and keep from doing the things. And I was always responsible for being the one who was in charge of them. And my sister was 5 years younger than I was, and she was a handful. But if I played school, you see, and they would be just as bad in my classroom as my later students became. But I mean, I learned early how to handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you engaged, and that gave you the feeling of control. So with teaching, you were a teacher for 30 years, and you have already mentioned that you write books, and
That's
you have
right.
collaborated with Mr. Antonio Bazia.
That's right.
Tell me a little
Not
bit about
Antonio, Antony, please.
Anthony.
That's very important. Anyway.
Anthony, Mr. Bazia.
Mr. Bazia is easier. That's why he does.
So, tell me a little bit about the book that you're working on with Mr. Bazia.
Right at the moment, I'm sort of independent. He has given me, he doesn't really write the books, he gets ideas. And usually they're based on something he's concerned about in the refugee community. And the one I'm working on right now is called Chicken Love. That's his title, which I think is a very attractive title in some ways. And it's a novel about 3 or 4 girls from Africa and other African young men. It starts in Africa and goes to the United States. And the plot of the book is about picking the right spouse. Because in Africa, you don't pick your spouse. Your family picks your spouse, and it has nothing to do with religion. It's just a cultural habit. And he said it's really, really difficult for the youth from his country, South Sudan, to come here and discover that everybody's running around picking their own partners. And he said, of course, the parents are horrified that this might happen with their kids, and it makes for a lot of serious conflict in South Sudanese families. So Chicken Love is about, I don't know, trying to get to the young people that you don't want to be brainless like a chicken, which is what you are when you're 16, but at the same time, you do want to have an opportunity to find someone who's good for you. So it's fun writing the book.
It sounds fun, and it sounds like it's a very rewarding experience to work with Mr. Bazia.
Oh, it always is. It's kind of like being with a juggler who has 19 balls going at the same time. And he'll say, here, I want you to take this one. Oh, and while we're at it, take this one too. Yeah, he can be exhausting, but he certainly is never dull. He is never dull. So.
Well, on that note, we'll take a brief break, and we'll be right back with more on Project Bazia and Ann Smith. Welcome back to PMC Studio. We're here with Ann Smith. As mentioned previously, you co-authored a book with Mr. Bazia. You have also been working with Mr. Bazia for quite some time.
Oh yeah.
Speak to the projects that you're working on. What Project Bazia does and how its effect.
Well, it's changed over the years that we've been together. In the beginning, he had this dream that unfortunately blew up in his face. He had this idea of taking a whole bunch of kids from different communities of refugees of his people, the South Sudanese, to Disneyland.
Wow.
It was a great dream. He was going to get like 10 kids from each of these 15 or 20 communities across the United States where he's already familiar with the families.
Yeah.
There was this little problem, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Very expensive proposition, and Bazia, if nothing else, is optimistic when it comes to money. There's just no other word for it. And he told the kids, we're going to go to Disney World.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. And the only thing that's going to have to happen is your parents are going to have to give us X amount of dollars over a period of months, and we were going to do car washes and bake sales and, you know, all kinds of things where we could sell T-shirts. I don't know, whatever we could do to raise the money. And he really poured his heart and soul into that. I will tell you how much money we collected. $5. $5 at one point. A girl who is still here in the community and who still believes in Bazia gave him $5 of her hard-earned babysitting money. The families never gave us anything. And I don't know why, but they blamed him when we didn't go. and so did most of the kids. Bazia promised us. We looked into grants, we looked into, at that time, Portland was a different community in terms of receiving the immigrants, and there were a few foundations that were slightly interested in this project because it had a purpose. It was intended to bring these kids who would probably never see each other again now that they were spread out across the United States and the world in that case. They would never have any contact with other South Sudanese, so it had a dual purpose. Get them all together, let them have a truly American experience, and let them have it as a group of South Sudanese. And so his idea was a good one. Unfortunately, it would have cost, I figured it out once, and it would have cost about, I'd say about $50,000 to do it. And that was, back 17 or 18 years ago. Yeah. So that was the first thing. After that, he switched directions, and we published books. I had written one book about his life growing up, and then I wrote books about South Sudan that were intended to be read by his people and to keep their heritage going. And that required for me a lot of writing and research and stealing pictures from Wikipedia like a madwoman. But we wrote 2 different books for that. I wrote the books, but he'd say, make sure you include this, make sure you include that. And after that, it was all about books. At the same time, we got involved with Portland High School because they had a huge population of unaccompanied minors who were attending school there. And we started a club which met every Monday afternoon. And he was like the Pied Piper. He'd show up and the kids would come into the room, 25, 30 kids, and there they could talk about what was happening. And this wasn't just African kids, it was kids from Iraq, kids from other countries. We didn't have too many Asians, but we had kids from the Middle East and from Africa talking about how hard it was for them to connect and how to get along here. We did a lot of special speakers. One of the first people who came to speak to the group was Kevin Joyce, the sheriff. Yeah. And he was fantastic. He brought a couple deputies with him, and he talked to them as a group. But since the majority of the people we had at that point were young men, he suggested that I leave and some of the girls go out in the hall so we could and he talked to the boys about potential problems because they were all getting invitations that they had no idea how to handle from white girls. I mean, a whole different culture. Yeah. Again, right. This is a culture where you don't get married as a man. You don't get married as a man until you're at least 35. Wow. You're still living at home. Mama and Papa will pick her for you. Wow. These guys have, yeah, I know. That was a big shock to me. These guys have no experience with social interaction with the opposite sex, except at church. And I'm sorry, but what can you do at church? Right. You know. Right. So Bazia said he watched it happen with even the young men from the camps that he worked with in other communities. He said they'd go get a job. The next thing they know, they'd call him up and they'd say, "I have a date." "What's a date?" And he'd say, "Oh, well, this young lady finds you attractive." "But I don't know what to do," he said. "My mother's not here to meet her." I mean, they were as shy as virginal women. Wow. And sometimes he'd say, "Okay, when you get to her apartment after the movies, if you still feel like you don't know what you're supposed to do, call me." And then he'd put the girl on the phone and he'd explain, Bazia would explain on the phone to the young American girl what she was dealing with was a young man that had no clue about interpersonal relationships the way they are now here in the United States. So that was just one of the groups we formed. It was called Bright Future. The kids named it themselves.
Is it still functioning now?
No. COVID killed it.
Uh-huh.
And the man we had backing us, who we did interview and we've done a number of shows about, is a man named Glenn Nurbach. He's now retired, living in Arizona. Wonderful. I mean, I just can't say enough about how Glenn made this work for us, because he was a teacher there in the school, a social studies teacher, with an open mind. And he knew how desperate some of these kids were to understand what they were coming up against every day. Everything from being made fun of because they went into another room to pray.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
whatever it was, he thought it was valuable to do this, and he worked with us for like, oh gosh, at least 7 years. We came here with the kids at various points. I had a bunch of Somali girls who were getting made fun of all the time for wearing the hijab.
Yeah.
And they made a film, which I think you probably still have somewhere on your records,
wonderful.
About why they wear their hijab, which none of them do anymore.
Yeah, right.
Which is funny, because the pressure to fit in is huge.
Yeah.
So
how did you meet Mr. Bazia, and how did you begin working with him?
I was teaching. Okay, when I retired from teaching, I hated teenagers. I really did. I didn't want to ever see a teenager again, I thought. I was burned out. And I waited till I was 65. When I came here, I was never going to teach, so I tried all kinds of things. I went to the art museum, became a mentor there. I did a lot of different things around the community, and none of them felt right. So I saw a sign in the window across from Reiki School, and they were running a teaching English to immigrants class, and they desperately needed instructors. And I looked at the sign and I said, oh, I can do that. And it's different from teaching teenagers, because these were adults. In fact, I loved it, because when these African people sat in my classroom and they said teacher, this is how they said it: teacher. I had never had that kind of appreciation or value put on not my American students. So to make a long story short, one day I was getting ready to teach my class, and the man who ran the program, who's still around Portland, brought in this gentleman in a suit with a vest and a red, white, and blue bandana on his head, which is Bazia, and said, I want to introduce your new student. And since then, Bazia has said many times that it took him a month, but he kidnapped me from the teaching program. And he said, I kidnapped her. That's what I did. I kidnapped her because I needed her to help me with my English. And that's how we met.
That's a great story. He has a very special name for you too, doesn't he?
Oh, Vanilla Woman. Well, I mean, that's more than I want the world to know, but no.
Project Bazia specializes in helping people from very troubled and desperate communities.
Yes.
There's a civil war raging in Sudan right now.
And
he is Sudanese, correct?
Yes, he is.
Yes.
He is Sudanese. He was there before the country was split into two parts. Yeah. And his father was a member of the military in what is now the North. But he was also a tribal chief in the village where Bazia grew up, which was the South. See, that's the problem in South Sudan. You've got an Arab culture in the North that wants to maintain their control, and then they're surrounded by, on the western side too, in Darfur, all right, and in the South, by Africans. And there's a big difference between Arabs and Africans. They're called, these guys are usually Christian. They don't speak, they speak Arabic, but the Arabs in the North tried to change the culture of the South unsuccessfully. And that's what the civil wars were about. That just kept happening. The split of the country, however, hasn't done much to organize the South. Because they never really knew how to govern themselves, because they never did. So he's involved in that at many different levels. He travels sometimes to visit communities where there are problems. And right now, this isn't going to be broadcast, is it?
Mm-hmm.
It is? Okay. Let's just say that some of the young men in the South Sudanese community need a chance to develop their own goals in life.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're still living at home.
Yeah.
Controlled by their families, and they're very confused.
Yeah.
And that's who he's working with now.
Yeah. And he has a television show, Mr. Bazia has a television show
New
here
Americans.
at Portland Media Center on Channel 5 called New Americans, where he often talks to a new American, or he talks himself about issues affecting new Americans and the troubles that are happening in Sudan.
Yep. Yeah, he's very knowledgeable, and like I said, think of all the people I've met in my life, and I've met a lot of people. I've learned more from him than from anybody else I ever knew.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and he's never, like I said, he can be irritating, but he is never boring.
Well, on that note, we will end there. Ann Smith, it has been a wonderful time having a conversation with you tonight.
Nate.
That is it for this edition of the PMC Studio class. We are very proud of our PMC Studio workshop participants who've been operating the cameras and directing the show with little or no experience. If you've seen anything that looked a little off, maybe a shaky camera, it's just because they're learning, and so can you. Please join us. You can find us on our website, portlandmedia.org, and choose workshops or get involved. And if you'd like to appear as a guest or want to interview someone, you could sit in Ann's chair or you could sit in my chair. Please contact pmc@portlandmedia.org or Brendan at portlandmedia.org. Again, thank you so much, Ann. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And for all of you viewing,
and thank you for the Portland Media Center's help to us so many times when we've brought in people that we wanted to interview and have their person.
You're welcome. You're
on
welcome.
The air.
Thank you. And if you have an idea for a television show, please reach out, portlandmedia.org.